Allow me a chance to tell you a little bit of a story about a man named Joe. Now, Joe, he's a 23-year-old who lives in the United States. He just graduated from college about a year ago, and after a year of searching for his first full-time job, he finally managed to find one. Now, he's starting his career off bright and early after college as a 23-year-old who's ready to take on the world. Unfortunately, the year goes by, Joe's hitting the end of his first year working for his new company, and he goes to his manager and asks if he's going to get any type of raise this year, or any kind of extra bonus or compensation of any kind. Unfortunately, Joe's manager immediately tells him, "Well, I'm sorry, but the company isn't doing too well. I don't really think we're going to be able to give you a bonus. We're not going to be able to give you a raise either. Unfortunately, we just can't possibly spare the money right now in order to give you these benefits." Joe goes home, a little bit disgruntled, but hey, this is probably pretty typical, Joe assumes. So he stays there for another few years, and at the end of every year, he asks the same question and he gets the same responses. After the fourth year, Joe gets a news update on his phone shortly after his yearly meeting with his manager, and he finds out that the CEO of his company has received a huge bonus and a pay increase at the end of every single year, when he was told very specifically that the company couldn't possibly afford to give him any type of additional compensation. Now, I'm sure that what I've just described to you is a picture all of us have painted in our minds at some point through talking with our friends, interacting with our coworkers, or even personally ourselves. And the issue that I think this story highlights, and that I think many of you will resonate with, is the issue of income inequality. Now, income inequality in the United States has officially reached all-time highs. And everyone is talking about it. Everyone is talking about this, and everyone has an opinion on it. But I think that I'm going to be able to provide some extra value here in my stance on this situation compared to what I've seen many other people discussing the same situation have talked about. So the first thing that I really want to lay out here is, why does income inequality even matter? Okay? What is income inequality? How does it affect us in our day-to-day? Why should anybody give a rat's ass about income inequality? Especially for those of us who are in the middle class that may be doing just perfectly okay in the current geopolitical, social, economic environment that is the United States. Many people in the middle class haven't really started to feel the hard pressures of income inequality, especially on a larger macroeconomic scale. So before I get off on a huge tangent, as all of you know I typically like to do, I want to try to explain why income inequality actually even matters to begin with. And then afterwards, we're going to get into the ways that I've seen other people approach solving this problem. And we're also going to get into why I don't really think that they're accurate and what my solution to this problem would be. So first things first, okay? What is income inequality? Income inequality is the difference between the wealthy people in a country and the poor people in a country, and just how big the gap in income is between those two extremes. There's also things that you can look at, like the Gini coefficient, but that's its own thing that I'm not going to be really talking about in this video. If you want to learn more about that, be glad to go and look it up. We are, according to the Gini coefficient, rather unequal when it comes to our income in the United States. But that's besides the point, for a different video on a different day, perhaps. What I want to talk about in particular is how our economy works. More specifically, how does our GDP function? Where do we get GDP from? Where does GDP get generated from in the American economy? And when you're looking into this, you'll very quickly find that 68% of the nation's GDP comes from the sale of consumer goods. Now, for those of you who don't know, a consumer good is any good that is at the final step of the manufacturing process and is ready to be sold to a consumer, you or me. It could be clothing, it could be food, it could be all assortment of different things. Electronics are a good example. But let's wind back here to the number I just said. 68% of our national GDP comes from the sale of consumer goods. Now, the way that this, I feel, should be linked to income inequality is that we have to look at the way in which people who are at the lower levels of income in the United States, over time, how have their wages grown? Why are we in this position where income inequality is so heavily swayed one way or the other? But before we can get to that, we have to actually demonstrate that the income is unequal by a large degree here in the United States. So something in particular, here's one of my famous handy-dandy charts to demonstrate that the level of pay increases in comparison to productivity increases over time. This is where I think we should really start the conversation on how we got to this point to begin with. So, if you look very closely at this chart, what you'll notice very quickly is that at a certain point, all of a sudden, productivity and income generated by people suddenly stagnates the wage increases that people receive. But yet, productivity continues to skyrocket. Interesting. That means that despite increases in production, people are not receiving increases in their pay, which before this point was the norm. This was very common for most of human history, that your workers would make more money as their productivity increases. But as you can clearly see from the chart, that's not necessarily what has happened over the past few decades. And as a matter of fact, if we were to think about this on a little bit of a deeper level, over time, very easy to imagine how this could lead to income inequality. Because if the producers, the owners of businesses, aren't increasing the wages of employees over a long period of time, inevitably they will be the ones who are reaping all of the benefits of the growth of the organization, of the increases in productivity. And over time, because of these increases in inequality due to these business owners reaping all of the benefits of the increases in productivity and not sharing with their workers, we are now at a point where income is so unequal that it's starting to put pressure on these, what I call GDP generating activities, such as going to the shopping mall and buying some consumer goods. As you guys know, here in the United States, we are the ultimate consumers. As I said before, 68% of our GDP is generated through the purchase of consumer goods. Now, here is where we get to link this inequality issue, income inequality, to an actual economic problem that we are starting to run into. When we get to the point that over time, and we're starting to hit that point, people at the bottom and even starting to get to the point where some people in the middle class can't afford to go and buy these consumer goods anymore, like food, clothing, gasoline, electronics, all these things that make the economy go when people purchase them. Well, if we get to a point where no one can afford them, which we're hitting, and 68% of our economy is reliant on people purchasing these consumer goods, well then, inevitably, we will become more reliant on the select few individuals who can afford to purchase those consumer goods. Due to this income inequality over such a long time, this trend, we have now gotten to the point where we are reliant on these wealthy individuals to keep purchasing random bullshit for themselves. But as we become more and more reliant on these select few wealthy individuals who can afford these goods and can afford to continue participating at the same or higher levels than they have in the past, well, we become much more dependent on their consumer purchasing decisions. And overall, that can put our economy in a very precarious position where it's more unstable. Because let's say, for example, all of a sudden, 10% of the population who has a vast majority of the money and performs most of the consumer goods spending decides, you know what, the 5 of us are no longer going to be purchasing as much. Well, now the whole economy is in a crisis. And that is the reason that I want to focus on here for why income inequality matters to you and me. Because if the economy crashes due to the very fickle decisions in consumer purchasing of a few individuals, I'm going to feel it and you're going to feel it long before they feel it, and they don't care if you feel it, as evidenced by multiple pieces of information that we've already discussed here that have led to this income inequality in the first place. Now, let's make this very clear here. When I'm talking about income inequality, I am separating this from wealth inequality. Wealth inequality, I think, is significantly less meaningful than income inequality is, because I think that if we can fix the income inequality problem, I think we will inherently over time fix the wealth inequality problem as well. I think that very obviously, if you fix income inequality, poverty rates will drop. And when poverty rates drop, wealth is generated by the average family. So I want to just make that a little asterisk here on the side. I don't care about wealth inequality at all. I don't think it matters, to be completely honest with you. So the next part of this video, I want to really get into 2 proposed solutions that I have heard people go over as I've looked into income inequality, and I want to explain why I really just do not think that they are effective solutions to this problem. And the first of those is the always popular, always bringing it up, you can never stop hearing about it, increasing the minimum wage. Now, I want to be very clear. I support increasing the minimum wage, at least to some higher level than what it is right now. I mean, I'm sorry, but $7.25 an hour, it's no longer cutting the mustard as minimum wage. It's like ridiculously low. Like, that's insane. Come on, I'm sure we can all agree not a single human being could possibly survive on $7.25 an hour in the United States. It's just not going to happen anywhere. So I do, however, think that income inequality can't truly be addressed by minimum wage. And the reason I say that is because I think that income inequality is being caused by massive structural level problems that contribute to it. I don't think that the minimum wage is enough. And the reason that I don't think the minimum wage is enough is because, one, it doesn't really go up over time just because you've increased it. Let me explain a little bit further. So it's hard enough, okay, to determine what the number should even be for minimum wage to begin with. Most people just say the standard of living, but you toss that up. It depends on where you're living, what's going on around you, what's happening, what your current situation is. So pinpointing an actual number to make minimum wage, extremely difficult. It's a conundrum in and of itself. But also, to go back to point 1 here, I think that when it comes to continuous upward mobility over time, minimum wage has been demonstrated over and over and over and over again to just not be enough. It's not comprehensive enough. It's not structured well. It doesn't have continuous built-in increases over time, which leads us into this situation where we're constantly playing the hangman's gambit with minimum wage for long periods of time. And to give an example of this, I remember when I was significantly younger, this was like 2012, 2013. And I remember at the time, the talk of the town was, we need to increase the minimum wage to $12 an hour. Then fast forward just a few years, well, now we need to change it to $15 an hour. It's still $7.25 to this day, like 15 years later, except now we're still not making any leadway even towards $12, but now people are saying it should be closer to $20 or $25 per hour in order to keep up with the cost of living. So I think that because it's so difficult to legislate multiple times, minimum wage just won't actually fix income inequality. I think we need to take it a step further. The other solution that I have heard many people propose is the, again, always extraordinarily popular, just tax the rich. And I think that poses a lot of really big problems. Not that I'm against it at all by any means whatsoever. I think that it would be phenomenal if we would tax the rich more. I like Eisenhower's tax policy for wealthy individuals. However, I think that it won't actually, again, it won't solve or address the problem of income inequality. And the reason that I say it won't actually address income inequality is because, quite frankly, I am disillusioned right now with the government's ability to take those tax monies and make sure that they help the poor and impoverished peoples. They're just not going to do it. Let's say for a second that we do get some grand tax policy passed that does tax these rich people to an extremely high level. Thing is, I guarantee you two things will happen. One, a vast majority of it is going to go straight into the military. Whatever's left, two, is going to be repaid in business subsidies to these extremely wealthy people's businesses in the form of a business subsidy, probably tax-free as well, and they'll essentially give them all of their tax money back in the form of business subsidies. Those are the two things I predict would happen if we were to take the tax the rich portion. However, I will say, if we do actually get a plan through and we do actually tax them and apportion the monies into helping poorer communities and poorer people, then yeah, I do think income inequality will be addressed in some level, and I think that that's a good thing. But I'm going to propose a solution that I've heard some people talking about, but I don't feel like I've heard nearly enough people proposing as the solution to income inequality in the United States. I think that we should go ahead and institute a legal federal CEO pay cap multiplier. Now, for those of you who have not heard of this, because an option that is significantly less explored by our media outlets than, say, minimum wage increases or taxing the wealthy. A CEO pay cap multiplier is when you take, well, you can structure it two ways. You can take the average salary of all of the non-supervisory and production level employees, and then you can set it so that a CEO cannot make more than a multiple of whatever X number you set the law to above the average salary of those employees. The other way you can do this is that you can simply look at the lowest paid full-time W-2 employee, and you can say the CEO of this company is not allowed to make X times more than that lowest paid full-time employee. To make this a little bit less confusing, let's give an example. So let's say that a company has a 10 times pay cap multiplier put on their CEO. And their lowest paid employee makes $40,000 per year. Lowest paid employee makes $40,000 per year. That means that the CEO can, at a maximum, be paid $400,000 per year. Now, I'm not saying it should be 10. This is just an example using 10 because 10 is the easiest number in the universe to do mathematics with. So that's why I chose that number. I'm not recommending that that's what we set the law to, but I do have a recommendation that I'll go over in just a moment. Now, if the company wants to pay the CEO more, what they'll have to do is that they'll have to increase employees' wages proportionally. This ensures that across the entire country, major businesses are no longer allowed to sit in a position and just reap the benefits of those increases in productivity without sharing any of those benefits with the employees who produce those goods. I think that what this effectively will do is that it will directly tie executive compensation to worker pay, which over time will address income inequality on its own. It will force continuous wage growth over time. This addresses the big hole I went over with minimum wage, where we don't need to continuously pass laws about the pay cap multiplier. It's just there. It is the pay cap multiplier. And as inflation occurs and CEOs are paid more, employees will need to be paid more in order for those CEOs to be paid more. And it also prevents wealth concentration at the top while maintaining some amount of economic incentives for businesses to continue their operations, which I think that massive taxes on the wealthy would probably be prohibitive of. So I think that that's some of the benefit, okay, of implementing a CEO pay cap multiplier. But at this point, I want to just give a real world example. Let's look at our data. I told you I'd show you some info from 1965, so that's exactly what I've prepared for you. If you go ahead and look at another one of my handy dandy charts, you will see that in approximately 1965, CEO compensation that was realized by CEOs, which means that that's how much they were actually paid, it was at about 20.8 times non-supervisory and production level employees' average salaries. That's pretty good. That means that, for example, if somebody was making $10,000 a year, the CEO was only allowed to make $200,800 per year. Pretty good. Or sorry, $208,000 per year. I didn't carry the decimal properly. And if we were then to look into more current times, we will see that the realized CEO compensation is 290.3 times that same group of employees, non-supervisory staff and production employees. This means that they're getting paid 290 times as much as the average employee is. Personally, I think that's a little bit excessive. We can all let's go mask off for a second here, guys. That's a little excessive. I don't care what your political linings are. You know that that's ridiculous. You know that there's no universe where somebody is actually working 290 times harder than someone else. That's just not reality. You are living in a dream world if you think that that's actually the case. And if we compare this historical context of CEO versus worker pay, we can very clearly see that this gap has widened drastically over time. And as I said, I think that this is a really big contributing factor to income inequality. I think that if we were to institute a pay cap multiplier, I think it would very rapidly change the economic landscape of our country in a way that makes us less reliant on wealthy individuals, increases the standard of living for the average American, and slashes poverty by multiple margins in a very short period of time. I think that if you were to give people a year to properly institute this, then we would probably see real change within 2 years. Directly related to instituting a CEO pay cap multiplier. And so we've gone over some of the benefits of a pay cap multiplier, but I do want to be fair. I always like to provide the pros and the cons to any type of situation that I'm discussing or any kind of opinion that I hold. And there are reasonable cons to instituting a CEO pay cap multiplier. For example, increases in pay for employees are not necessarily a reflection of performance. I'm sure all of us have been at work and sat next to that employee that is just the most incompetent person you have ever met in your entire life. Okay? That you might legitimately think that based on performance, this person shouldn't receive a raise, but a CEO pay cap multiplier would inevitably result in that person increasing in their pay at some point or another. And on the flip side of this, increasing pay doesn't also promise any increases in performance or productivity either. So that person's probably going to receive more pay and not improve very much in their daily activities, which is a con overall. I don't like inefficiency in anything that I do or see or suggest. I find it to be obtuse. And I think that another con of CEO pay cap multipliers is that it will increase the risk of creating what's called a brain drain. Okay, so whether you like it or not, CEOs of major companies do have a very valuable skill set that is rare to find. They have certain charismatic skills and negotiating skills that aren't very common, and that's typically why they end up in the positions that they are in. I mean, CEOs at this point only represent, I think last time I looked, I don't have the actual number in front of me, but like 0.1% of the entire US population. So there is something to be said there, that if you were to institute this, maybe the wealthier CEOs who are a little bit older might just say, I've already got $55 billion. I don't really give a rat's ass anymore. I'm just going to retire. Fuck you. I'm taking my skills with me. And that can cause some amount of economic shock over time, which isn't necessarily good. But I think that there is one major con that I do actually put some amount of stock into, and that con is that putting in place a CEO pay cap multiplier could legitimately lead to some companies being extra greedy and just choosing to fire all of their lesser paid employees rather than bring them up to any higher level. And furthermore, what it could also lead to, in addition to a reduction in jobs, is that it could lead to them just deciding to outsource to third-party companies things like, let's say, their janitorial services. For example, maybe I'm not going to hire an on-staff custodial service worker, and instead I am going to just hire a custodial company to come in and clean it as I need to for a lower rate, and I'll let them deal with the liability of the CEO pay cap multiplier for lower paid employees. However, I think that is very well balanced by the fact that you can't possibly get rid of all of your employees. And I think that an effective tool here, and something that should happen anyway, is that we need to reduce the prevalence of 1099s in businesses across the country. But that's a video for a very different day. We're not even going to get into talking about that right now. So, in summation here, we're getting ready to wrap up. But in summation, what should the multiplier be? At this point, I'm sure you guys are sitting there. Some of you have really ruffled feathers. Some of you are feeling really calm and cool and cucumbery right now. But I'm sure after hearing me yap for about 20 minutes about this, I'm sure some of you are like, Tom, you are absolutely out of your fucking mind. And then there's another group of you who are, Tom, you're kind of speaking some sense here to me. But no matter what, I find that both groups always end in asking me, what do you think the number should be? So this is a little bit of a complicated story for me. I've changed my opinion on this numerous times. I've gone back and forth. It's really hard to pinpoint a number that you think this should be. I used to be a supporter of the 25 times multiplier because I thought, hey, let's just bring them back down a peg to like the 1970s and set them at that level when we were growing economically and we were extremely successful. However, we do have to take into a consideration here that at 290 times, which is what they are currently at right now, well, as of 2023, that's what they are currently at. I think that if we were to reduce them down to a 25 times multiplier, we might see such a major shock in our economy that things become destabilized in a really unsavory fashion. I think that it might cause such a large shock to our economy that it could cause more problems than it's worth. So, I've revised my stance, and after deeper thought about the stabilization of the economy and things like that, I'm deadlocked between 40 times and 50 times as the multiplier that I'm recommending. And the reason that I say this is because it would encourage businesses to increase pay over time. It would avoid a massive economic shock from sudden changes. It would create more sustainable reductions in income inequality. And also, it would bring back long-term planning to businesses. Because right now, one of the major problems that we have in the business world in the United States is that CEOs truly do not give a rat's ass about the companies that they work at. They are much more interested in getting a quick hit of money and then getting out than they are actually founding and growing a business from the ground up for 40 years like they used to. There aren't very many Henry Fords running around anymore. That's not really where we're at in the economic landscape any longer. And I think that it would be wise of us to stop pretending that that is the landscape that we're currently operating in still. Now, I think that because long-term planning would come back and we would reduce the pump and dump, essentially, that CEOs have built a relationship for doing, I think that we would just see a lot of positive changes extremely quickly. I feel that the pros of doing a CEO pay cap multiplier would vastly outweigh the cons of instituting a CEO pay cap multiplier. And I'm really curious to hear, do you guys agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And if you do agree with me that we need to institute a CEO pay cap multiplier, what do you think that the number should be? Like I said, I'm stuck between 40 times and 50 times, but I really want to know, what do you guys think? So talk with me down in the comments. I would be happy to argue with some people in the comments, or if you see something in the video that you think was unclear, or maybe I didn't do as good of a job of explaining, please point it out to me. I am more than happy to have conversations with my commenters and viewers about these types of topics. I find it immensely interesting. But remember to like the video if you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that subscribe button. Whether you enjoyed it or not, hit that button, goddammit. And as always, have a nice night, guys. Bye, everybody.